Marge Long. I'm here with you today from Gaylord Area Council of the Arts. This video is being brought to you from a grant from Community Financial Credit Union and their Summer of Sharing grants. In this video, we are going to be talking about landscape sketching, and we're going to learn how to do a road, a river, and a lake with some reflections. Okay, so for landscapes, we're going to use our little accordion book for landscapes, and you can see that I started a few of them in my accordion book. Some things that I want to point out to you before we begin working on this image is that when you're doing a river or a road, and I will use Prismacolor on here to show you this road in case you guys can't see that. You are going to have some perspective. So basically what happens is the same thing that happens if you stand on a sidewalk and look all the way down to the horizon, is that it just turns into one point. Now on a road, it's a little easier to see. This is a curved road, so that's even, adding another degree of difficulty. But the same thing happens on a river. And on a riverbank, anything can happen, very natural kinds of forms there. But the main thing to make your river look like it's lying flat is to have it come to a point. Another thing that's important when you're doing water is that whenever you're working in the water, that you're working horizontally. Otherwise, if you work vertically there, that becomes a problem. If you keep your lines in the water horizontal, then your water will lie down for you. You can see that when I am doing my landscapes, what I'm doing is judging the darkness, judging the value. How dark is this tree? How dark is this tree? How dark are these bushes? How dark is this river? And that's what I'm using the Prismacolor pencil for. When we get our image done with the Prismacolor and get the values in there where we want them, then we will take our watercolor pencils and go over those. And the Prismacolor won't move, so our values will be there. And it kind of does some of the work for you. So I'm going to begin working on this image that is on this iPad here. I see I have a problem because this is kind of a vertical image. I'll have to turn my booklet vertically, or else I could have changed the image, but I kind of like this image, and I like how dark it is. Now that it's fall, the sun's a little lower in the sky, and you're going to get some really dark areas when you're out and about. Most of my landscapes that I do are done in my kayak, and so I like to use these simple materials just to have a few things with me. You'll notice that when it comes to trees and foliage, I just kind of scribble. It's kind of a shorthand. If you look at any of Van Gogh's landscapes, you'll see he invented a lot of different textures for his bushes and trees. He's a great person to look at for ideas for those. This river goes back a little bit, and what I'm putting in right now is the reflections, and look how easy that is. The reflections change if it's windy. This is the fun of doing landscapes, because I have to change my pencil. Because it's not like a portrait where if something is a 1/16 of an inch off, someone's going to know it. In a landscape, things change, branches you know, are just natural, and we don't have to be really, really so on with our measuring. I think that's really what appeals to me about um, doing landscapes. Reflections are just an image. A lake is like a mirror, so whatever is going on in your background, if it's a nice, this looks like a pretty calm day, you're going to see the same thing. If I want to do my trees, if I want to have a little more interesting reflection, I usually just take my paddle and just smack the water a little bit, and I can change what the reflection looks like. These trees are really, really dark in this image, so I'm going to be using lots of my Prismacolor pencil. Usually you'll see a white area right at the edge that kind of separates. This one I don't really see one. This I'm beginning to see something there. And the more of these that you do, the more easy they become, because you learn things like that. You learn how they will act. And in these trees, you can get a little more scribbly. Branches go all over leaves. These look like, that one looks like an evergreen, but that might be some type of hardwood, or maybe oaks or maples. So that's basically the background. I don't think I'm going to add anything in the front. We'll use this space for our sky reflection in the water, and then for our tree, just kind of follow. This tree kind of has this hump in there that's I'm going to play down a little bit, because the thing that makes trees look like trees is that the trunk is wider at the bottom than it is at the top. And this tree, because it's in silhouette, is just very dark. This will be kind of a simpler landscape. It's kind of nice when you're taking pictures to have something in the foreground. The tree is, even though you can't see because it's very dark, the tree is going to be, because things in the foreground will be darker and have more detail than things in the background. And normally, if this wasn't a reflection, you would see bark, and you would have a little more to work with. I'm going to simplify and not put every little branch in here. And branches can just like the trunk of the tree, the branches are going to be heavier where they meet the trunk, and then get thinner towards the edges. And leaf shapes are just, sometimes you see a perfect leaf shape, but a lot of times you're going to see a folded leaf or a partial leaf, and you just want to make something that looks nice. That's the fun of landscapes. You can change. You don't have to draw exactly what is there. You can make it look a little different. Okay. All right, we'll add some. This looks like it's kind of a little bit gray day. It's a little bit dismal, and clouds just like any natural thing are all kinds of organic type shapes. No right or wrong here. We could add a little bit of black watercolor to make it a little bit gray, but you have to be really light-handed with that, or your clouds will get really gray. To me, this looks a little more sky blue as we go further down the horizon a little bit. Light is actually coming from there, so we want to remember we're going to use horizontal type lines on our water. Sorry, have my hand in the way. And to leave some light areas. Usually as the picture gets closer to you, the color gets a little more intense. That will happen at the top also. So whatever happens up here has to kind of happen down here. And this will just be really free with these. I am going to use my black watercolor, and I'm just going to really carefully add just a little bit of pigment to get kind of a grayed down blue for my sky. And I'm not sure what this paper is going to do. This is a hot press watercolor paper, so it is made for watercolor, but it feels like it's going to soak in a little bit. The more different kinds of papers you use, you get a little bit used to them. I am going to add some dark greens in our trees so that when I add water to those, we'll get a little more color in here. And I'm even going to add, even though I don't see it in the picture, I'm going to add just a little bit of yellow in here just for a better contrast. The sky can be anything. We've seen sunsets and sunrises. All right, losing my lovely sock here. All right, so I'm gonna do the water in the sky first and see what we can get here. One thing that we want to be careful about is to go around those leaves a little bit, otherwise we touch that black, that's going to be, I guess we could have done the sky first and let it dry, but you don't always have that option if you're out and about doing these. And that is the most fun way to do landscapes, is to be on site, plein air. And you can see the water's going to kind of help you out there and actually make it look like water. And then I'm going to get into my black and dark green and just start now. If when I'm doing this, some of my color goes into the sky, it might kind of dissolve there. Might want to be a little bit careful about that. Remember, when you're in the water, you're working horizontally. Always, always. Otherwise, your water will not tend to lay down. And the last thing I'm going to do is my tree here. Getting a little bit of, looks like a little bit of texture on here. Not as dark as my picture, and that might be okay. Adds a little bit more. And so there is that landscape. All right, so for my next landscape, I'm going to attempt to do the arch rock from Mackinac Island. Probably some of this image might look familiar to some of you. It's a little difficult to fit it in this format, but I think we'll give it a try. I'm going to start out with my Prismacolor pencil, and you might be able to see that I did sketch out just a little bit in pencil and if you wanted to do that, that would be a legitimate thing to do. So with my Prismacolor pencil, I am kind of beginning to maybe squint my eyes and try to find the darkest darks, and that's where I'm going to apply my Prismacolor pencil. So it's pretty dark under this arch with these stony kind of shapes here. Just like we scribbled in the trees, we're gonna just try scribbling in some of these rock shapes. I'm gonna try to go in the direction that the rock is forming, that texture is forming inside there. And then beyond that, we see some trunks of trees that are pretty dark. There's very dark down in here. I'm gonna just kind of scrub with my pencil. One thing you'll notice when you start doing some of these landscapes is that you really go through the Prismacolor pencil. I just started working like this a few weeks ago, and I have a pencil that's about 3 inches long right now. So we're just trying to pick out some of the darker, remember for those needles on pine trees and for leaves, we're just kind of inventing a shorthand. We're just kind of scribbling and try to invent a texture for this rock face here, this kind of famous in Michigan anyway, rock that has that cool archway. We want it to look like stone. That's the challenge that we have right here. There's a little dark area coming in here. There's part of a tree. Some of these we'll do with our green, and we might have to go back in. One thing with these values is you can always go back after your painting dries, which this paper seems to be drying pretty quickly. After your paper dries, you can always go back in and make it a little darker. So we just want to get a little more texture on there. I'm not going to add these people on the top, but I do like the sky showing through there because it's going to make more sense with our water when we add the colors down there. guess there's a little bit of beach down there, really kind of hard to see. I might just avoid that. And because this tree is kind of in the foreground here, I guess it's a tree. I'm just going to do my little shorthand scribble and try to get some of that in there. I'm going to darken some of this rock right here. This is kind of important. It's in the foreground. It's where we want people to be looking. Just trying to get some of these little abstract shapes in here. What we need to be careful of is, as humans, we're pattern makers, and we tend to make patterns that are equally spaced, but nature doesn't really work that way. And so sometimes that gets us in trouble. If we're going to make our dots equal distant, it's not going to be as believable as we'd like it to be. Alright, we'll start adding some of our colors. Remember, this is the Prismacolor, so this doesn't go anywhere. This is going to stay here. It's going to be our values, our darkest values should be staying put. Gives us one less thing to worry about. This looks a little odd in here. My pattern looks a little, I'm going to add a little more. Okay. Alright. Let's add some green watercolor to some of our tree areas. And there's just these bushes kind of growing out of this rock. I'm going to add a little yellow in this area. And this sunlight is hitting some yellow over here where the sunlight's hitting the tops of those leaves a little bit. It'll add to our color. It's kind of not a real colorful scene. The blue, we got blue, green, and gray. Nice to add a few colors. In fact, I think I will, you can see a few orange leaves in here. It's always nice to have all the primary colors represented. Just kind of is a good painting rule. And then I'm going to go back to more green. We also have a dark green, which makes our job a little easier. I'm going to go with my dark green for these trees down here. And then we'll add our blues, the sky blue. I'm going to, normally I do water horizontally. This has a little bit of wave action coming in at a kind of a slant. So I'm going to try to mimic that. May get me in trouble here, but and Then we go with a little bit deeper blue in that deeper water area. And we want to, I purposely left this area up here. I'm not going to add the people, but we really need to know the sky color so that we understand the color of the water down here. I'd even put a little bit of the dark in there. Okay, now remember that this is going to stay white because we don't have any pigment on there. So we do need to bring in our watercolor, our black watercolor. So I'm checking to make sure this is our watercolor marker. And I'm just going to give this rock a little bit of a gray tone, not a lot. And remember, this color is going to move. Okay. And this does look a little tan to me. I might add a little bit of brown, just a little. That rock is kind of a tan cast to it. Okay, we're gonna get out our watercolor pens and see what we can do. I'm washing it off here. I think I'll go with the rock first and see what we can do with that. Getting it a little bit darker with some of that pigment there. That's all right. We don't want it too dark. And then I'm going to begin to scrub in some of these dark evergreens down here. Probably should have been a little more careful to leave that rock area. That looks a little congested in there. Yeah. Nature is quite chaotic, so I think our scribbles will stand there, and then we're going to hopefully get some nice blending. Hope you can see that. I know it's kind of shiny when I wet it. Bring that water down. Being a little bit careful not to drag too much of that green. Into those trees. But yeah, I think we've kind of done it. I think that I would let this dry and work back into here a little bit more. I can see what happens. I'm not sure if our Prismacolors will go over that. I guess they do a little bit. Okay, so I hope you'll give this method a try. Remember to use your black Prismacolor to create the values, and then when you go over with your watercolor, your Prismacolor stays where you put it. In this picture, I'd probably go back and put some more greens in there once everything is dry and get a little darker value. Sometimes it takes a little bit to build up those layers. But I hope you will use these art supplies and get outside and do some sketching.